Okay, so I am going to show you how to make raisins. The most delicious raisins you've ever had, in my opinion. I don't even like raisins, store-bought raisins, I never have. But I really love these raisins that I make myself, and I started doing this a few years ago. You don't need a dehydrator for this, just an oven. I started doing this a few years ago and just tried it out, and it worked really well, so I thought I'd share how it's done so y'all can enjoy it too. So just wash and stem your grapes. This works especially well for grapes that are old. Like, I just love fruit, and in the summer I buy tons of grapes all the time. And sometimes I don't eat them in time when they're really fresh, and so you can make them into raisins if they're a little old. Or it also works well for if a batch of grapes wasn't that good. Even if they're sour when they're grapes, they still make delicious raisins if you make them this way. So just take your grapes, spread them out on the plate. I have done it where you put a whole ton of grapes all like on top of each other, and that seems to work out fine because they'll shrink and they'll eventually, fit in between each other. But if they're all just laid out flat and not stacked on top of each other, then they get done a little sooner. It can stain the plates, because there's juice often oozes from the grapes when they're getting heated up. It can stain the plate. I wouldn't use a plate you really love because it could potentially break theoretically in the oven. I've never had that happen, but just any plate or dish or pan should do. You can use any kind of grape, it doesn't matter what color they are, but I do always use seedless. I hear that you can leave seeds in there and then they'll be crunchy, but if you want it similar to the store-bought, use seedless. So then put it in the oven and put it on the lowest setting that your oven has. Mine is 170, that's still kind of high. I've had ovens that I made it in that went even lower than that, but 170 seems to work fine too. And then I make a sign because I or somebody else in the house might forget that I put the raisins in the oven because they're going to be baking at a really low temperature for a couple of days. And of course, if somebody ends up turning the oven on high while they're in there, they're going to be ruined. So I always put a little sign down. Okay, so here's how they look after they've been in the oven a few hours. The first thing that happens is they plump up and they start to ooze a little bit of juice. But before they start shriveling, they get really big. So we'll put them back in the oven once again. Oh, but first you want to put them in the oven before you start the oven, because that way you don't put a cold plate in a hot oven, and it makes it much less likely that it would break. So once again, we'll put it on the lowest setting it's got. There we go. And we'll leave it in there for a while. So they were in the oven all day yesterday, and here's what they look like now. Turned them off over the night. But see, they're still kind of squishy. They're shriveled somewhat, but they're still pretty squishy. So some of the very smallest ones might be ready, but they can all become ready at the same time. You don't need to take them out at different times or anything like that. So into the oven again, and they should be done by tonight. And so here is the finished product. And you can see some of the biggest ones are still a little bit squishy, whereas the smallest ones are very hard. And actually these weren't as juicy as they often are. Sometimes they're stuck to the plate with juice, and then you just pry them off, and that's why it stains. But in any case, at this point you just put them in a baggie, and then the ones that are hard will kind of soften up, and the ones that are still a little bit squishy will kind of become less squishy. It'll, the moisture will all kind of balance out, and you'll have delicious raisins, the most delicious you've ever had. I hope you enjoy making your own.